We're back on the Sportsmax Zone. A few of the Caribbean's finest were competing at the Oslo Diamond League meeting earlier today, with Grenada's Kirani James being the standout performer, racing to his fourth win of the year in the 400 metres. Christopher Taylor was in that event as well, clocked 45.52 seconds for third. Omar McLeod, the 2016 Rio gold medalist in the sprint hurdles, was scheduled to run, but he pulled out. The reason for his withdrawal still unknown. Daniel Thomas Dodd just missed out on a medal or a podium finish after finishing fourth in the shot put, throwing 19.04 meters. World indoor silver medalist Chase Ealy of the United States became the second woman to throw over 20 meters this season, winning the event with 20.13 meters. Natoya Goule, she could only manage fifth the 800 meters event there. Joining us to review the day's event, or track and field analyst Leighton Levy. Leighton, welcome to the Sportsmax Zone. Let's start with Kirani. He's been so good for so long. World Youth, World Junior, Olympic medalist, gold, silver, bronze. You forget that he's still just 29 years old. How good was he today?
He's been, what we've seen all so far this season, Lance, he's been very consistent. 44.02 is season's best, but 44.7 in the conditions that they're running today was in line with what he's been doing all season. And I think it makes you wonder, whether or not he's actually putting himself among the contenders now with the World Championship just a month away, along the likes of Stephen Gardner and, of course, Michael Norman and, Ronald Ross. Kirani James is, it seems, a perennial contender, and what we've seen so far this season from him and today does nothing to change that. I think he's been consistently good, and it suggests that he has the grave disease situation under control and is ready to return to being at least close to the best that we've seen from him.
Yeah, well, Michael Norman is the only one faster than him so far this season. But to be fair, a lot of the athletes haven't really, turned up the throttle just yet, because we are still some weeks away from the major events. We know he was a medalist in Tokyo, so in theory he was top 3 in the world last year. How do you see his current form compared to his Olympic year in Tokyo?
Right now he looks just as good, actually. If you remember, last year he was not as consistent as he was this year, primarily because I think they were still working on how they're going to manage the grave disease and how it affects him on those periods when he was not at his best. So far this year, he seems to be running very, very consistently well. He was in control of the race today, for example, and said he just wanted to take it home from there. It tells you that the condition that he suffers from is not at the forefront of his mind anymore. What he's focusing on is getting the best out of his performances. And I think we're seeing that on a more consistent basis so far this season, which tells us that potentially he could be in even better shape than he was last year, given the fact that we saw him run, I think it was 43.8 last year at the Olympics. As it gets closer to the World Championships in mid-July, I think we could probably be seeing 43s on a more consistent basis, not just once, but perhaps twice, which could be very, very crucial in where he ends up on the podium, if he ends up on the podium in Oregon.
Your impression on Christopher Taylor, the young Jamaican, 45.52 for third. Pretty small. Most 400-meter runners who are dominant globally tend to be bigger than Christopher Taylor is. But he's been running some decent races this season, hasn't he?
If nothing else, he's been consistent. And that's a good sign, because if you remember, when he went to Tumbleweed a few years ago, there were serious concerns about whether or not he would have been able to make the transition to the senior ranks, given how beat up his body was. Last year he got to the Olympic finals, finished 5th or 6th, I think it was 44.7. This year he's been consistent right throughout. So maybe it means that he's in shape again to get back to a final and probably run even faster. But 45, as it is right now, 45 is not going to do it, clearly. But when you're running that consistently in the mid-45s, you can expect a drop as it gets closer to the races that really matter. So I'm hoping that's not what is the case with Christopher Taylor. And if that's the case, then probably expect better performances from him as when the championships begin to unfold, both the national championships in just over a week's time, and of course, for the bigger event in Oregon. Sorry.
Yes, and Leighton, you're a man, you always know all the scoop, the behind-the-scenes information. Any update on why Omar McLeod, he withdrew from today's 110-meter event?
Still a mystery. I've been checking. I've not heard anything. I mean, he was down to compete, and it was a last-minute withdrawal. And what it is, I'm hoping it's not anything serious, because Jamaica's cadre of sprint hurdlers has taken a significant blow this year. For example, what it is right now is that Ronald Levy is out. Damian Thomas is not in the form that got into the semifinals of the Olympics last year. And of course, we see Omar McLeod pulling out now. That leaves the likes of Orlando Bennett and Hansel Parchment, the Olympic champion, as the lone athlete standing in that event. And that's not a good sign, just 2 weeks away from the national championships. Sorry. So we can only hope that it's a precautionary move on the part of Omar that will then, ensure that he's in the best of health.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks.
Definitely. And Natoya Goule, your assessment of her performance today, she could only manage 5th in the 800 meters, Leighton. So what did you make of, how she ran, where she can improve?
Natoya is a mystery. So far this year, we saw her try to run from the front, and then she got outsped down the stretch. Last few races, we saw her run with the pack, but still getting outrun down the stretch. My best bet here is that she's working on some kind of strategy that fits in between those two strategies, that we'll probably see something the likes of at the national championships and in Oregon. But right now, she doesn't look like the athlete that ran really well last year and getting into the finals of the Olympics. But my guess is that she's working on something that we're going to see in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Leighton. And I was going to push the point about Goule along that line, because I want to ask you, based on your knowledge of this thing and covering the sport for such a long time, do athletes in events, given the form and quality of other athletes, do they ever prepare to only get a minor medal? In other words, Atingmu is peerless right now in the 800 meters. When she's running, you get the impression that she'll have to fall into a hole to lose. So do athletes like Natoya Goule prepare to say, well, all right, let me see if I can be second, if I can be best of the rest? Or is it that their coaches wind them up to go for the top slot, and wherever they fall, they accept?
I think it's more the latter, because I think if you start telling yourself that you're going to lose, you're starting out on the wrong foot to begin with. I think every athlete, especially elite athletes, I'm not talking about those who are on the periphery now, that prepare for major championships, they prepare to win. That how well they do depends on their execution, and it depends on the strategies that they employ, given the opponents that they're up against. Because when you look at what we saw last year from Natoya Goule, for example, she was right there in the top 3 or 4 in the world. Right now, she's not in. I don't think she's in the top 10, because Keely Hodgkinson, who I think is a legitimate medal contender, along with Atingmu, and there are a number of others who are, making a case for themselves. Right now, in my mind, certainly Natoya Goule is not doing that. I don't know what strategies they're working on, she and Mark Elliott. I don't know what plans they have, so I can't say whether or not they're preparing, to bring on and run a 156 and surprise the world in Oregon this summer. But right now, for most athletes who are at the elite level, they're prepared to win. They set a target, for example, of 156.9. I just bring a number.
Yeah.
And they aim for that number. Will they get there?
Yeah.
Or if not, they don't. But if they don't, then they'll probably fall within a window that will allow them to end up on the podium.
Do you see parallels, though? Do you see parallels between Chris Taylor in the 400 and Natoya Goule in the 800? And here's where the parallel element comes in. Their size restricts the kind of work that can be put into them, preparing them for those events, relative to the main competitors. If you look at Atingmu, it's almost as if she was built in a lab for an event like the 800 meters. Tall, lean, rangy, perfect. Chris Taylor is just smaller than the optimal size for a 400-meter man. So there's a restriction on the amount of muscle you can put on him. And given his size, there's also a restriction in the kind of workload a coach can put into him. So where those two athletes are concerned and their size constraints, does that put a crimp on the kind of preparation that they can undergo in preparation for their respective events?
I don't necessarily think so. Legrand Santos, for example, who ran today.
But he was an anomaly. I'm happy you went to the Dominican Republic, man. He was an anomaly, though.
But he won a silver at the Olympics. So the thing is that Nathan Allen is not much bigger than Chris Taylor either. But Nathan Allen has run 44.19. The thing is, I think it's how you prepare and how healthy you are and how your body is able to manage those, the glycogen usage and, not you burning up fat when it should be burning glycogen. There are a lot of things that are factors into how an athlete prepares, and how they perform at the very top.
All right, let's give you a minute to compose yourself, Leighton. So it's a question, and we're putting it to the expert who's answering, because I know that there are people who wonder about this. Because when you look at Chris Taylor at the start line in 400 meters, and you look at the men around him, you look at Kirani James, lean. Stephen Gardner, leaner. Yeah. And you look at the other guys, Michael Norman and the other guys. Their physique, their build-up is different from Chris.
Yeah, it is. Chris Brown, the Bahamian, was also a pretty small guy.
Yeah.
I think he won a world indoor gold, which the indoor track suits his size.
Yes, because it's tighter.
For the bigger guys. So there is some element.
There are exceptions to every rule, and there are no absolutes. But I'm just saying in general. If there's something, and our expert is answering that. Leighton, are you ready again?
It can be a disadvantage, especially in the era that we are in now. You mentioned a number of 400-meter runners right now, all of them are above 6 feet tall. I mean, Stephen Gardner is like 6'4", Kirani is 6'3". So, of course, there's a physical disadvantage. But I think it comes down, again, to how well you prepare and how your body responds to that preparation. Because I do believe that had Christopher Taylor gone to Tumbleweed a couple of years ago, healthy, I think he'd be a lot faster now in terms of the times that he's running. So I think there's merit to both sides of the conversation, George, but I think a lot of it has to do also with how the athlete's body responds to the training.
Yes. I asked you this question maybe about a month ago or maybe 5 weeks ago, and I think it's a better question even now. When you look at what the Caribbean, the Caribbean athletes in the forefront, what they've been doing between the last time the first time I asked you the question and today, if you look at the Grenadians, Kirani himself, and the world javelin champion, and you look at the Bajans who are coming up in the 400 meters, Williams and Jones, a man and a woman. You look at what the outstanding Trinis are doing. You look at the Jamaicans and the Bahamians. Is the Caribbean poised for another bountiful harvest at Commonwealth Games based on how their outstanding athletes are trending and, of course, at the World Championships?
I think so. I think when you look at across the board, Shawnee Miller-Weibo, Stephen Gardner, Kirani James, Sharika Jackson, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, and Lane Thompson-Hera, those are some of the main Caribbean athletes. Of course, Anderson Peters, you can't forget him, and Keyshawn Walcott. I think right now, if you should take bets about whether or not they will do well at the World Championships, you'd have to guess yes, because they're trending in the right direction, and you can see where the progress has been made as they get closer to the money meets, so to speak. And I think the Caribbean will do itself justice again this summer, as well as they did in the Olympics last year. Maybe not, because I think what we're seeing also is that there are a number of athletes from other countries who are also trending positively in terms of their...
You say that, Leighton, with the final time we have, you say that, but here's the thing I would say. Of all the names that you and I mentioned just now, I would expect, if they went, everyone to medal at the Commonwealth Games for sure, and most of them to be in contention for medals at the World Championships. The names that you mentioned, Thompson-Hera, Fraser-Price, Jackson, Peters, James, Miller-Weibo, these are people you expect to be on the podium at the World Championships.
Yes, But let me draw an example here and give you one of the reasons why things can be a little bit different this year. Last year at the Olympics in the 200, for example, there were about 7 or 8 women, 9 women running 21 seconds. Not so many so far this year, only 2. One of them, Abby Steiner, ran 21.8 at the NCAA's last week. That makes her the fastest in the world this year, and she's incredibly strong because despite the fact of running over 40 races so far this season, she's running her best times now, and you have to believe that given what we've seen from her, she could spring a surprise in Oregon this summer.
All right.
And
just hold it. Let Leighton clear his throat before we continue. We're almost at the end anyway, so this is a final comment from Leighton. Leighton, are you ready to finish up?
Yeah, man, and you're looking at other athletes as well who are coming through. Alison DeSantos today, for example, medalist, yes, last year, but right now, with Carson Varhom injured and Ryan Benjamin not doing much so far this year, we haven't seen much from Samba. Right now, he's favored to win the gold medal, so those dynamics could shift in Oregon.
Yeah. All right, Leighton, thank you very much for soldiering through with us. We had to turn to you as our track and field expert. Back with much more on the Sports Mag Zone after these.
Stay with Sportsmax on YouTube and follow us on all social pages for updates, news and entertainment.